Hey, this is Daddy's Workshop of the Carolinas, where we treasure things made and restored by hand. So recently I had a few questions about these classic Delta, MicroSet, and jet lock fences, how to tune them up, and what the differences are between them. So we'll do a short video comparing the original MicroSet fence to then the jet lock fence, and then a later iteration of the jet lock fence. So stay tuned. Okay, so let's start with the original MicroSet fence. This was the fence that was on the Unisaw from its origins up until, I'm not sure an exact date, I'm going to guess somewhere in the 50s, maybe 60s. These fences also got switched off on a lot of fences, so it's hard to exactly date that. I'm sure somebody on Vintage Machinery or OWWM has a more precise date, and you can certainly look that up. But this was the original fence that was installed on that came with Unisaws from its origins until at least through the 40s, and I think through the 50s as well. Just a few things to note about this one. You have your locking knob here that locks the front casting, right? So that moves freely and then locks down when it's engaged. And then to lock down the back locking mechanism, you have a knob here, right? So there's two things you have to lock with these original ones: the front, and then right now, if we feel this, right, it moves. So we have to twist this front knob to get the back locked, right? And now that's locked. So that's the basic functioning with these two aspects here. And then of course as well, you have the MicroSet adjustment with this knob here, okay? So those are the basic parts. So now if we move to this one here, we see that there's a difference in the front casting. That's the main difference, right? This front casting is square and goes up. Gets you a little bit more length on the fence in the front, but that's not really the big reason they made the change. The big reason they made the change is because this is really sort of tedious. It's a lot to do to lock down each time, and sometimes getting this to tune up just right can be somewhat of a challenge. It's just another step, right, to do this and to turn this each time you lock the fence. So what they came up with here is a way to do that all together. When you engage the locking knob, you see this large slotted screw moves as well. And what that's doing is engaging the back clamping mechanism as well as the front mechanism at the same time. So that was a significant improvement. Right now, to lock the fence, all you need to do is engage the locking lever, and that locks the front and the back. Okay? And then the latest, a later iteration of the jet lock fence, same casting, same setup here, that this engages the front and the back at the same time. You can see that move to engage the back, right? But now they have an aluminum extrusion that is over this sheet metal, right? This sheet metal does leave a little bit to be desired. A lot of times people put a wood facing on it or something like that. Later, eventually, Delta puts this aluminum extrusion over it to create a little more rigid fence and also a little more true fence. So that's just a start to compare. Everything else is pretty much the same with each of them. The main change is in this front casting and in the locking mechanism that engages front and back rails at the same time. So now let's get into how you'd adjust these fences and tune them up properly. Okay, so when tuning up one of these fences, first we want to make sure that it slides freely on the front and back rail. In this case it does. Sometimes something binds up, and so what you want to make sure is that the front rail and the back rail do look to be the same distance from the table all the way, that there's no clear skewing one way or the other, right? It's not getting narrower or wider. Obviously that'll cause a binding. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of wax on the rails. That's one of my go-to techniques to get these moving smoother, is a little bit of wax on the front and back rail, and then the thing moves freely in general. Then the next thing, once you see that it's moving freely like it should, then we want to lock it down and see if it lines up with the miter slot. And in this case, if I run my finger along the edge here, I can see that there's more of the cast iron table that is showing here than there is at the end. So our fence is going in a little bit. That's not what we want, right? That would cause binding with the blade. So it's a pretty simple adjustment. There's two bolts on the front that will loosen. And once those are loosened, then this fence freely moves because these sizes in the sheet metal are oversized, and the bolts then lock into the casting. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, right? So we can adjust that very easily. So we want to line it up with this edge of the miter gauge slot, and we'll make sure that now it's not towing in. That looks good. We'll lock it down. Okay, so now these front bolts are locked, and we have a much better lining up here of the fence and the miter gauge slot. Okay, so now we lock the front down, and it locks, but the back here is loose because we didn't tighten down this knob here. So with those adjustments there, you can adjust the fence in parallel with the blade and use the miter slot to do so. All right, so now we have a setup that locks, squares up as it should. You see that? Just pulled it right in nice. And then we lock it with the knob, and then we're good there. Okay. Sometimes there's also things to adjust with the back clamping block. And similar to the front, these two bolts are in oversized holes, which then allows this clamping block to move sort of up and down and in and out. And then you lock it when it is fitting properly over the rear rail. So there's a little bit of adjustment there as well. And just like we tuned this one up, it's the same setup for the later jet lock iterations. The front bolts just are a little bit further spaced out, but it is the same adjustment to move the fence to be parallel with the blade, and then two bolts in the back to adjust this rear clamping mechanism if needed. Usually you can get all the adjustment you need though from this front bolt. So as I mentioned, what's different with this later iteration called the jet lock fence, the original was called the MicroSet, is that when you clamp the front handle, this slotted screw slides out, and because it's connected to a threaded rod all the way to the back, it then locks on the back. But sometimes it's not adjusted properly, and you can see that's still moving at the back here, even though the handle is engaged. So what that means I need to do here is tighten this slotted screw to shorten that threaded rod essentially, so that when I engage the handle, it clamps down. Nope, still not there. So we'll keep tightening to see if we can get it to where it locks properly. There we go. Now when I lock the front handle, the front clamping mechanism locks and the rear clamping mechanism. So all the adjustments you need to do for the back clamping mechanism is right here. And similarly with this iteration as well, the only difference here is you have this aluminum extrusion over the casting and over the sheet metal fence. So there's a short video on tuning up a jet lock fence to make sure that it locks on the front and the back, and that it is parallel to the miter slot. Pretty simple design. And now I'll just show you what the parts look like when a fence is taken apart, to show you what's really happening inside there so you can have a better idea of what to adjust and so forth. Okay, so here we have a jet lock fence disassembled. Okay, so this is one that has the casting that comes up at 90 degrees, which is not the original MicroSet, but is the jet lock fence. Here we have the locking knob. It just screws into a cam mechanism here. And then here we have the MicroSet adjustment with its spring, and then its geared head, which fits into the bottom of this rail, which has the teeth that make the MicroSet adjustment work. So those are out there as well, just so you can see what this casting looks like. And then there are some additional internal parts here. I'm not going to get into anything with that at this point. That make the video a little bit too long for what I'm shooting for here. But that's the casting and the handles or knobs. And then here, let me show you this threaded rod I was talking about that connects front and back. So you can see here, this slotted screw is connected to a threaded rod. And when you tighten and loosen this, it effectively reduces or increases the length from front to back. And so that's connected to this clamping block here on the back. And that then allows you to make your adjustments there to make sure it locks on the front and back. So hopefully by taking that apart and showing you those parts, it gives you a little better idea of how this thing actually works. If you have one that's broken or needs repair or tune-up, hopefully that gives you some help. So there you have it, some tips and tricks for using these classic Delta fences, the original MicroSet fence, and then later iterations of the Jetlock fence. Sometimes these fences get a bad rap, but honestly, in most cases, they just need to be tuned up properly. Waxing the rails, adjusting the front mechanism and rear mechanism, and knowing what all these different bolts and fasteners do is the key. And if I can do it, you can do it. So, thanks for watching. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and like on all the various social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, like you're supposed to do to help all these videos do well. And we'll see you next time.